Okay, well, let's call the meeting of the Mineral Mining Review Board to order here at about 11 o'clock on August 6th. Our only item on the agenda today is Mr. Schimmel's mine and getting this to close out. But do we have minutes on the agenda? No. We have the public hearing section as part of Open Meetings Act. So is there anyone in the audience who wants to make comments not related to agenda items? If so, please come on up to the podium. I don't see anyone doing that, so we'll move on to our review item here, which is for Dan Schimmel's project called The Mines. And this is more of an update meeting. Typically, we don't meet in the middle of the summer. It's more of a February thing. But this site we're trying to bring to closure. So I put together a presentation. If you don't mind, I'll run through some slides and then offer some comments. And Mr. Schimmel is here. And let's see if our schedule still stands. Is that okay? All right. Well, Mr. Schimmel, when it comes to review items for today with his project, The Mines, which we've looked at for quite some time, along with a lot of other projects, the whole virus shutdown has really strained logistics for a lot of the operations in the city, including the mining activities. So he originally was to have all of his restoration activities done by July 1st, and definitely no more mining this year. We also had a question back in February about what was the status of the golf course site plans officially from a city standpoint, and those plans have expired. They actually expired on 9/5/2019. So if we take a look back to what we did on February 18th, this board provided an interim mine closeout permit with the following conditions. That final seeding and grading plus hauling and construction had to be completed by 7/1. And then we would hold an October 2020 on-site meeting to review all final grades and restoration. And then we would hold a public hearing in November 2020 to formally close out all activity on this site. And Mr. Schimmel would bring in the material required in that section of the code you see in front of you. Because it's the last part in the mining code, and it says, here's what you need to do to close out a mine forever. So that's our schedule, and hopefully we can stay on that.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yeah.
If you go back. So I see on here it says 9/5/2018. I thought you said 9/5/2019, so I just wanted to clarify.
Site plans are good for 1 year from the date of approval.
Okay.
And they expire if nothing has been done.
Okay.
So now you can take that a couple of different ways, but from a staff standpoint, we would say on 9/5/2019, the golf course site plan expired.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. And just for the sake of full disclosure, Mr. Schimmel did call me and say, hey, look at the whole COVID-19 thing really put me way behind the deadline of 7/1/20. And I did give him a verbal saying, please continue to restore. There's no reason not to. We were getting this meeting scheduled, but no more mining. So I think he's been operating on that. And the following pictures from Rachel shows the progress he's made over the past couple of months. So this is a photo, and Rachel, you can walk us through these if you like.
Yeah, these are just because I go out there once a month for soil erosion inspections, and I've just been trying to, as a part of that, just kind of take good pictures that show the mine and the progress it's made, because it's kind of cool to see also, and also for the purpose of this board. So yeah, this is just in May 29th, 2020. So you can see it's just kind of being filled. This is from the view of the access road looking down into the mine. So you can see there's, just fill ongoing. And if you want to go to the next photo. And then June 30th, you can kind of see in the background, now this is looking east. There's still some trucks going in on June 30th, but you can see a lot of it's really starting to take shape, and it's a lot more full from the previous month. And then if you want to just jump to, I think it was July 29th. So this is when I was just out there last week. This is again looking to the east. And where you previously saw those trucks in the last picture, that has all been filled in too. So it kind of dips down from the access road. You can see that over to the right there. And then it's all pretty much even and full. And it's just also July 29th, so just more perspective.
Excuse me, let me back up a couple of slides here. To the schedule. This is really what it's going to come down to. And this is what I'd like to discuss with Mr. Schimmel. If we look back to the schedule we established this February, we were still going to hold an October 2020 on-site meeting as a group with Mr. Schimmel to review all final grades in restoration. I would hope that we can still do that. We'll see if we can agree to that today. And then if we do, and things look good, we'll schedule a public hearing in November to close out all activity on the mine. I think that's trying to be a little bit flexible, but at the same time, even though this site is undercut by gypsum mines, so it can't be developed in the future, you do want to leave it in good order. And so that would be hopefully what we see on the plans for the public hearing in November 2020. With that, are there any comments from the board before we ask Mr. Schimmel to come up?
To see progress.
Mhm.
Frank, how does
That sounds like a logical spot for Mr. Schimmel, if he can come up and say what you've been doing, what your plans are to be done, and then can we still hold an October on-site meeting? Button in the middle should turn it on. And I reset that thing. It's not plugged in. Yeah, no, that's okay. Just project and we'll be okay.
we should be, I guess our plan is to start seeding in September. We've got probably a big week to finish grading. We got most of our topsoil in place, holes filled in. This spring, we went around the perimeters basically and seeded everything on the perimeters. That's established pretty good. There's a couple washouts that Rachel notes in the monthly review, and trying to make sure the grass on either side of the washout to firm up, and then what we'll do is we'll probably straw mat that and seed that when we seed in September. I don't see any problem with having an on-site meeting in October, and we're fully prepared to close out November 2020. So
Mm.
mine's course, just to kind of give you a little update on that. As you expressed, there's a lot of, at least in my world, some uncertainty on whether that would be prudent to do it this time. And so what our thought is we're going to let it establish, settle out for a year, and then take a look at what's going to happen and see if we can't do something. I think it's a pretty neat piece of property. I don't know if there would be a possibility of a couple of the edges of the property to the west, I'm sorry, to the east, whether we put something up there, but at this time we have no plans.
All right. Any questions?
As far as, I think one of the provisions in the closeout is that we would have contouring and a mat, and as soon as we get that kind of shape with here in the next couple of weeks, I'll have Excel survey that and then have that plan ready for submittal prior to the closeout.
All right. Any comments from board members?
I have a question. So you're gonna be grading it out to match the plans dated January 28th, 2020?
Pardon me?
So you're gonna grade it out to the plans dated January 28th, 2020? I can put them up on the screen.
Still don't, I can't.
Sorry.
Muffled.
I wonder why. So I have the plan that's dated January 28th, 2020. We have received it in February. And I just was asking, the grading that you're doing in the next couple weeks here, you're grading the site to meet those contours, correct?
They won't be exactly to that, so that's why we will resurvey it and submit it as it is in place.
Okay.
How different is the grading going to be compared to the plan that we're looking at right now? Because right now the site generally looks like it's in conformance with that plan. Are we talking, and I know the contours say they're approximate and it's a concept, are you keeping that concept or are you changing the site of the grading here?
I couldn't tell you right now exactly because I haven't done any topo work. And within the next couple of weeks, I can have Excel do that, and then I guess basically resubmit a corrected, in-place topo.
Yeah, I would say as long as the as-built in-place topo is generally in conformance with that plan, then we're okay. But we want to make sure that all the grading's working towards the approved plan.
It's, I can't say it's close, but it's in the area. So all the, I mean, they're, as far as a restoration slope that conform to a restoration spec that Walker is providing, we will have that.
My other comment, just in reference to this plan, there's this storm pipe shown here. So if that is or isn't going in, we just need some justification from the engineer. So if you don't put it in, we just need to know that it's not needed.
We will have
So
that in there.
it will go in, perfect.
Well, we will have a corrected version, whether or not we're gonna need that pipe in there or not, I don't know.
Okay,
At
Yeah, just
this
make sure
time-
that's-
at
make
this
sure
time, I
that's-
don't think we're going to.
okay. Yeah, I would just say just make sure that's addressed, because that's the plan I'm going off of. So if that changes, we'll just need something from the engineer saying it's not needed.
All right, we'll have that.
And Dan, Rachel and I have talked about that pipe. It looks like that pipe was installed for the golf course operations. Obviously, from our perspective, if there's no development on this site, it's better to have more sheet flow instead of a point source coming out of the end of that pipe. So I'm fine with it not going in. If there's no need for it, no golf course development. I did have one other question, Dan. You kind of alluded to future development out there. Possibly. You're going to let it sit for a year and then take a look at it. Is the thought to look at putting the golf course back in, or are you looking at a different type of development?
Well, there are certain things I can and can't do there because of the mines underneath it, and the mines go at kind of a funny angle. The mines are kind of like this, and so conceivably you maybe could do something along in here, but really don't have anything definite.
So, in addition to the mines being under the area, my main concern is just the amount of fill that's been brought into this site. Some spots up to 40 feet, only 90% compaction. To me, that puts, I would like to see a note on the final plans that say that future developments need to perform a thorough geotechnical survey before we start building buildings on this. We don't have the same compaction you'd typically have on this site as you would have on a typical building site. So we want to make sure we annotate that so that we don't, someone who's looking at these plans 10 years down the line understands what occurred out there.
That sounds fair. Laura, can we make sure that gets in the minutes?
Got
And
it.
we would ask that those comments be included on the formal closeout plans that we'll review in November.
What did you ask for? Or what did you say we should do?
I want to note on the final plans that just says that any future development will need to do a geotechnical study out there because the amount of fill that's been brought in is pretty deep and the compaction methods aren't, 90% compaction is not adequate for a building to be built on. That's not saying that you can't do it. It's just saying you need to do some subsurface investigation beforehand to make sure that the foundations are done properly. A lot of times these things get away from us and maybe personnel change over and they're not aware that all this fill is brought in out there. So the note on the plan just highlights their attention to that fact.
So basically, in the area, you decide to build something, there's 95%. If they could show 95% compaction, they wouldn't have to do that study, but if it's 90%, you're going to require that study.
Yes. 90% is easy to achieve, 95 is a lot harder. It'll settle over time, but I mean, we don't want to build a building or a bunch of houses out there and have a bunch of settlement when we know that in some spots 40-foot soil is dry. So, like I said, nature will take its course over time, and if they want to develop before then there's other needs and methods that a subsurface geotechnical engineer can recommend.
I would guess, or dare, nothing's ever 100%, but I would say 99.9% there will never be a housing development on this property.
Okay.
And we can talk about it in November, but, even if we wanted to, I guess I'm not asking for it, but have some sort of building restriction. I mean, kind of got that on the rest of the property anyway, so. But I think what you were suggesting is probably would do the same thing.
Yeah. I mean, I think that,
Problem with that.
yeah, I think the general thought was if it's a golf course, then it's fine, right? If a golf course settles out, no big deal. But yeah, just a general note for the structure, any structures that will be built on the site to look at the subsurface, pretty thoroughly.
I guess if we're gonna do that, then I would wanna make sure that that compaction requirement follows a building type use. I don't think I wanna be able to be, if it's a recreational use, be it golf course or whatever. I don't know if that makes sense to have that requirement.
Yeah, if it's a golf course, the comment's only applying to like a building permit, future buildings.
That's fine.
Right.
That's fine. Anyway, I guess that's the plan. We might start a little bit sooner with seed, probably, but we could, if we're ready, depending on the weather, start last week of August, but basically prime time seeding is September 1 to October 15th.
So Dan, real quick, are you pretty much done with bringing fill into the site then? It's just just grading what's out there right now?
We're grading.
Okay.
I did have a request by Kent County, Danny Lou. They're gonna build a new office building on Butterworth, and there was some material there that we hauled into that site 20 years ago. He wondered if I had a spot for it, and if I had a heart for donating to the county, so official, I guess if it's official, we'll get back to you. But that would be something that I would come back and ask that we'd be able to do something like that. Other than that, that's all I have.
And I think the answer would be that as long as the fill and the restoration matches the plan, then we can probably work with that.
The other thing that's gonna occur, and that won't be part of us, the next 7 months, the power line that is closest to the pit is being replaced, and that there will be quite a bit of activity, vehicles, construction stuff that will be accessing that, and then that line stretches from 4 Mile to the Wealthy Street substation. So all those existing towers are coming down and new poles we would replace. And I would guess that you guys are somewhat aware of that, but they will be coming in and around that area. And so if basically our activity is done. I've got a dozer and a loader working on site. The rest of that, if you do get calls or complaints, it's a little bit out of my control.
Any further comments, questions? If that's the case, then what I would recommend we do is follow that outline that we approved in February, which would be to schedule an on-site meeting in October, where this group can meet with Mr. Schimmel out on the site, essentially just to eyeball the grades, make sure everything is generally agreement with the plan, restoration plan. And then, provided that's okay, we'll schedule a final public hearing for November. And we would ask Mr. Schimmel to follow the checklist in that last section of the mineral mining code, supply all that information, and then hopefully in November, we could put the final stamp on this one as closed.
My only comment to add to that is in November that Dan has the plan that shows the current grades out there after restoration with that geotechnical note about the subsurface.
We'll have a new plan submitted for that.
Cool.
And there's a, if you look at that referenced part of the code, there's a punch list of items that need to be brought in by the mine operator so that engineering and the DPW director can verify that the mine is being closed according to plan. And that when the board sees it, we've got all the material needed on the checklist to say, okay, we're done. So if we have no further items, then what I'll ask Laura to do is help us out scheduling an on-site meeting in October. And that'll be the next step in the process. This isn't a formal public hearing, but we did send notices out. The formal public hearing for closure will be in November. Is there anyone in the audience who has any general comments? Feel free to come on up to the podium.
My name is Jim Schock, James Schock. I live at 47 Skyline Circle, Northwest Grand Rapids, Michigan. I'm a neighbor. I live on the Grand Rapids side of the border. 600,000 cubic yards of sand have been removed. It looks like about 600,000 cubic feet of soil have been replaced. Has the soil that's been replaced, is that ever or will it ever be tested? Do you know where it came from? The statement that because of the underpinning of the mines, that will not allow for development, does that mean the area will remain fallow, not developed? I hear that the small golf course is off the table. Is that so? I don't really understand this compaction and how long it takes to get compacted enough to have development placed there. Mr. Schimmel says it's at least 90% chance that there will never be a housing development there. In the process of taking out the 600,000 cubic yards of sand, there was also 34 acres of hardwood timber that was removed and probably sold for profit. Is there any plan on the part of the city of Walker to have trees replaced on that fallow property? And you people in the city of Walker has been in the business of allowing sand to be mined out of your area, geopolitical district. What in the past has been done once the sand has been removed from the sand mining sites? I'm just a curious neighbor. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you for your comments. Anyone want to have anything to offer over that, or Mr. Schimmel, do you have anything to offer, or no? Okay. I can't say that, sir, we have an ordinance in place that walks a development through the sand mining phase all the way through to closeout. And you may be aware, may not be aware, that the state of Michigan actually tells municipalities that you cannot say an absolute no to a sand mine if the mineral is in place. So the city is preempted somewhat by state law. And what the state law says is that as long as the mineral is in place, mines shall be approved. The city can pass a local ordinance, which we've passed years ago, to allow the extraction subject to an annual permit. And on an annual basis, the mine operators have to bring in plans showing what they've extracted, what they've brought back in, and then they're working towards a restoration plan. So Mr. Schimmel, since I think it was 2008, somewhere around there, has done extraction, and then he's been working towards this restoration plan, and he's there. So I will say that Mr. Schimmel has followed the city's code, and, you know, we've had some bumps in the road over time on various issues, which tend to happen on any development site, but we've worked towards the final goal of ending the sand mine on the site, and we're there. The other issues I would ask that you direct more to Mr. Schimmel, because those are more neighborhood level issues. And the big thing to keep in mind in here, folks, is that a lot of our sand mines, including this one, are undercut by gypsum mines. And the gypsum mines are 80 to 110 feet underground. They're right in the gypsum shale layer. If you ever get a chance to go down into those mines, it's pretty cool. So there's literally a honeycomb underground in the west side of Grand Rapids and then this part of Walker, that for the foreseeable future, unless something happens from a development standpoint, you just can't build over them because you put enough weight on there and they're subject to collapse. So that's why you see many of the mines, they essentially take the sand out and then they bring the fill in to restore the grades, and then the city follows the code to put the final blessing on them. So you see those all along Butterworth. This is the first one in that area. And then there are at least two others that are getting close to being at this phase 2, to just close the mines out. Now, historically, there have been some sites before Walker had a sand mining code that may have not been restored like we require them to do now. So you'll see those out there as well. But I'll say Mr. Schimmel is bringing this one to close, and as long as everything goes good in November, the site will be fallow, open, until he brings in a golf course plan or some other passive recreation.
I just wanted to quick add the tree idea. I think that's something I'd like to explore as the board. These areas that are undermined by gypsum that for the foreseeable future probably won't be able to be built on. Encouraging some sort of tree replanting. I think I'm thinking of places like Meekoff Pit as well. I think that's a really good idea. And I know Dan's trying to close this out, but I would just like to explore that for future mining sites.
So noted, and we will look at the code on that. It makes sense, particularly up against adjacent homes. Okay, any other comments? Then I don't think we need a formal motion on this one. We're just going to switch into the next step, which will be on-site meeting in October. And then after that, we will put public notices out for a public hearing in November to close the mine out officially. That sound fair to everybody?
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Dan is jumping to the adjournment motion. Oops, I pressed the wrong button. Dan is jumping to the adjournment motion. Do we have any support for that?
I'll support.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, opposed. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.